The room smelled faintly of polished wood and soft flowers. Light spilled from the tall windows, falling gently on the grand piano at the center. The woman stood beside it, her hands folded for a moment, feeling the weight of the room in the quiet expectation. She had played in small halls and modest rooms before, but this place was different. The air was filled with a subtle tension that made her heartbeat quicken. Across the room, he sat in a leather chair, his posture straight and commanding. He was a man used to power, to control, to getting what he wanted. His eyes scanned the room, barely noticing the crowd of guests who were talking in low voices. Wealth had taught him many things, but one thing he could not understand was music. But it always seemed like a puzzle he could not solve, a language he did not speak. The woman took a deep breath, feeling the keys under her fingers. Her life had been shaped by hardship, by mornings that came too early and nights that went on too long. Piano was the only place where she could speak freely without words. To every note was a part of her story, every pause a reflection of the moments she had endured. Today she would share that story, though she did not know if anyone in this room would understand. He leaned back slightly, observing her as if she were a curiosity, a piece of art that did not belong in his world. He had heard performers before, many of them claiming to be exceptional, yet he remained unimpressed. To him, music had always been about technique, precision, and control. Feeling, he thought, was irrelevant. The audience around him seemed ready to be moved, but he remained calm, almost detached. As she placed her fingers on the keys, a hush fell over the room. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself. Her life had taught her patience and endurance, and she used both now to prepare for what she was about to do. The first notes came softly, almost like a whisper. They floated across the room, delicate and hesitant, as if testing the waters. The audience leaned forward, sensing the emotion that was quietly emerging from the piano. The notes were not loud or aggressive, but they carried a weight that was subtle yet undeniable. Her fingers moved with care, guided by memory, by feeling, by something deeper than practice alone. Each chord she struck seemed to breathe, to carry a story from her past into the present moment. He watched silently, arms crossed, eyes focused, yet skeptical. He noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the careful movements of her hands, the way she seemed lost in something invisible to everyone else. He did not feel moved, at least, not yet. But something about her presence, the way she seemed to command the room without words, caught his attention. He had never encountered this before. The music began to build slowly, a gentle rise that felt like a tide coming in. There was a mixture of sorrow and hope, a rhythm that echoed her life's journey. The audience felt it too, some shifting in their seats, drawn to the story being told without a single word. She played from the heart, not for recognition, not for praise, but because it was the only way she knew how to express herself fully. He noticed a slight tremor in her fingers as they danced across the keys. For a man used to control, this was foreign. There was no script, no predetermined outcome, just raw honesty pouring from the instrument. It was uncomfortable, almost threatening in its simplicity. He had always believed that skill could be measured, that perfection was the only thing worth noticing. But here was something that could not be measured, could not be compared to anything he had ever known. The notes rose and fell, carrying the room along with them. She played pieces that spoke of loneliness, of struggle, of moments when life had been unfair and unkind. But there were also glimpses of resilience, of courage, of small victories that had kept her moving forward. It was a story that could be felt rather than explained. The room was quiet, the audience mesmerized. Hanging on every sound, he shifted slightly, feeling an unfamiliar stirring inside. It was subtle at first, a small awareness that perhaps he had been wrong to dismiss music so easily. There was something about the sincerity in her playing, something beyond technique, that tugged at a part of him he had long ignored. He had built walls around himself, believing emotions were weaknesses. Yet here in the space between notes, a wall was cracking. The woman continued, unaware of the inner conflict she was creating. She was focused entirely on the piano, on the feelings that needed to be expressed. Each chord she struck was a reflection of her journey, of mornings she had faced alone, of nights filled with doubt, of tiny triumphs that no one had noticed. Her life had been quiet in its hardships, but loud in the emotions she carried inside. And now, in this moment, she gave those emotions freely to anyone willing to listen. He felt a tug at his chest, something he had not experienced in years. He did not understand it, could not name it, but he knew it was powerful. There was no grand display, no dramatic flourish, just honest music that reached a place he had long thought unreachable. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on her hands, noticing how they moved with care, how they seemed to speak without speaking. The piece she played shifted subtly, moving from sorrow to hope, from uncertainty to quiet determination. The audience could sense it, responding with soft smiles, subtle nods, a few silent tears. It was a shared experience, a silent understanding that words could never capture. She played not for applause, but for connection. And the room felt that connection deeply. He realized he had been holding his breath, and when he exhaled, it felt heavier than usual, as if the music had found a place inside him that had been empty for a long time. He did not move, did not speak, but he was changed. It was a quiet revelation, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. The piano had reached him where nothing else could. The final notes fell softly, lingering in the air like a gentle echo. She lifted her hands, opening her eyes slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and vulnerability. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, then the audience erupted into applause. It was not loud or chaotic, but sincere, a recognition of the honesty she had offered. She smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement of the connection she had created. He remained seated, hands resting on his lap, absorbing the moment. He could not yet put it into words, could not yet understand it fully, but he knew that something significant had happened. He had entered the room expecting to be indifferent, expecting to remain unmoved. Yet here he was, feeling something he had long denied, stirred by the simple act of a woman playing piano from her heart. As the crowd began to disperse, stayed where he was, watching her carefully. There was an intensity in her eyes that spoke, of resilience, of quiet strength, of a life shaped by more than privilege or power. He felt a curiosity he could not explain, a desire to understand not just the music, but the person behind it. For the first time in a long while, he was willing to listen, to see, to experience something without judgment. She packed her sheet, music slowly, aware of his gaze, but uncertain of its meaning. Her life had taught her caution, had taught her to measure reactions and read intentions. Yet there was no hostility, no dismissal, just observation. She wondered what he saw, what he felt, and if he understood the story she had shared through the piano. There was a tension, a promise, an unspoken question hanging in the air. He finally rose from his chair, approaching her with a calmness that contrasted the usual authority he carried. He said nothing at first, merely observing, as if trying to find the right words. When he spoke, his voice was measured but genuine. It was the first moment in a long time that he allowed himself to show interest without judgment. He complimented her not on technique, but on honesty, on the feeling that resonated beyond the notes. She nodded, a small smile on her face, feeling a strange mixture of surprise and relief. Recognition had come not from skill alone, but from the truth she had shared. She realized that the connection was mutual, though different from anything she had experienced before. Here was someone powerful, someone accustomed to control, yet moved in a way she had not expected. The moment lingered, a quiet understanding forming between them. It was not love, nor friendship, nor rivalry. It was simply recognition. That music could bridge worlds. That honesty could penetrate even the most guarded hearts. The room, the audience, the wealth and power all faded into the background. There was only the piano, the woman, and the billionaire, who had begun to feel something new for the first time in a long while, and in that space, silent and charged. With possibility, the first thread of an unexpected story began to weave itself. A story of understanding, of emotion, of connection that neither had anticipated. But both would remember for a lifetime. The moment had arrived. The server stood in the small open space near the center of the restaurant. Heart pounding, hands still trembling from the weight of all eyes on them. They felt exposed, like a performer in a theater. Though the stage was just the floor between tables, and the audience was a mix of curious diners and the mischievous group that had sparked this unexpected challenge, the server took a deep breath, trying to steady themselves. They reminded themselves that it was just a small display, a tiny act forfeit, no judgment of their worth. Yet the mind raced with possibilities. What if they failed? What if the group laughed or jeered? What if the moment stretched into embarrassment instead of excitement? The fear was real, but so was the tiny thread of courage that had begun to grow in that initial decision at first. They did something simple, small, almost experimental. It was a soft, unassuming movement that drew attention but wouldn't risk disaster. The group's eyes widened in curiosity, leaning forward with expectation, smiles growing wider. Other diners turned their heads, sensing something different in the air. A pause in the usual flow of dinner service that made them curious. Even the staff behind the counters glanced over. Caught in the energy of the moment, the server realized that the audience wanted to see authenticity, not perfection. That gave them a strange freedom. They began to let go of the tight, controlling thoughts in their head and focused instead on what felt natural. The first actions, hesitant and careful, gave way to more confident ones. Each movement, each small gesture, carried a part of their personality, their hidden talent, the things they had kept private for fear of judgment. The group at the table laughed and clapped softly, encouraging without realizing how important their support had become. Time seemed to stretch oddly. The usual rhythm of the restaurant, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation, faded into the background. It was just the server and the moment, an invisible thread connecting them to the people watching. Their nerves had not disappeared, but they had transformed into focus. Every breath was measured, every glance intentional. Every movement filled with a quiet energy that seemed to grow with each passing second. The group at the table tried to tease lightly, but it no longer felt threatening. Their laughter became a rhythm, almost like a beat accompanying the performance. The server felt a strange connection not just to the group but to the space itself. The restaurant, normally a place of orders and transactions, had become a stage, a place where something new could happen. Even the other diners, initially curious, began to sense that this was more than just a fleeting act of founet, was something alive, raw, real. The server thought about the risks. This was uncharted territory, stepping out from behind the role of service and into visibility. It was vulnerable, exposing a part of themselves that few had seen. Memories flickered a time in school when trying something new had led to laughter from classmates. A reminder of why caution had always been their companion. But there was also memory of a smaller moment, when taking a chance had led to applause, to recognition, to a fleeting taste of pride. That memory anchored them, a small light in the swirl of anxiety as the performance continued. The server noticed something unexpected. The initial fear had begun to blend with a strange joy. There was satisfaction in taking control of the moment, in showing authenticity despite uncertainty. It was not about impressing anyone. It's not about proving skill or talent. It was about being seen, truly seen, and connecting through a shared experience. The audience, caught in this honesty, responded naturally. Their smiles, claps, and quiet encouragement fueled the server's confidence. The group, still leaning forward, began to ask questions, encouraging interaction. The server answered, not with rehearsed lines, but with instinct, allowing small jokes and personal touches to come through. The energy shifted subtly. The teasing became playful. The expectation became collaboration. For the first time that night, the server felt a shared rhythm with the audience, an invisible dialogue that did not require words, only presence. Other diners began to engage softly at first, then more openly. A child giggled in delight at a small, clever move. A couple nearby smiled knowingly, appreciating the courage it took to step into the unexpected. The server felt the initial fear soften, replaced by an awareness that this was a unique moment, one that could not be repeated. Every choice mattered, yet there was no right or wrong, only presence and attention. The server's body began to relax. Movements became smoother, hands steadier, breath more measured. The energy in the room, once intimidating, had become supportive, a gentle current carrying the performance forward. The restaurant, buzzing just moments ago with its usual chaos, now felt unified around this small, extraordinary event. Even the staff, initially on high alert, paused to watch. Caught in the simplicity and beauty of the unfolding moment, the group at the table began to lean back. Still engaged but less demanding, allowing the server to guide the pace. The laughter became richer, the smiles warmer, the teasing lighter. It was no longer about challenge or expectation, it was about connection, mutual discovery, shared experience. The server realized that the fear, though still present, was now an instrument rather than a barrier. It had pushed them to focus, to be authentic, to engage fully in the moment. The server thought about the journey so far. The choice to step into this unexpected space, to take the risk, had transformed the ordinary into something extraordinary. A simple request from a group of strangers had become a portal into self-expression, into courage, into human connection. The restaurant, the night, the tables, the audience all had shifted, becoming part of a story that would linger long after the dishes were cleared and the lights dimmed. There was an unspoken understanding forming. The group at the table recognized the bravery in stepping forward. The server recognized the trust implicit in their attention. It was a delicate balance, fragile yet resilient. In these small, fleeting moments, the ordinary rules of interaction, the routines, the hierarchies, the roles, had melted away, leaving space for something real, something alive, something shared. The server began to explore more, gradually expanding what they were willing to show. Each movement, each gesture, became more confident, more expressive. The audience, sensing this growth, responded with warmth, their attention no longer a pressure, but a gift. The initial fear, the pressure, the anticipation, they all had a role, shaping the performance, creating a tension that made the eventual release more satisfying. Every interaction, every glance, every laugh contributed to a larger rhythm. The server realized that this was not just about the group at the table, but about the entire space to diners. The staff, the energy that flowed through the room. There was a communal element, a silent acknowledgement that something beyond the ordinary was happening. For the first time that night, the server felt fully present, aware of the weight and beauty of the shared, human experience unfolding around them. The performance moved into a natural rhythm. It was not scripted, not planned, not rehearsed. It was alive, reactive, responsive. The audience, initially spectators, had become participants, their reactions shaping the flow, their energy fueling the courage of the server. The room, once a backdrop for routine, had become a living entity, responsive and engaged. As the performance drew toward its natural close, the server noticed a quiet shift. The initial tension, the anxiety, the fear, they had transformed into a sense of accomplishment and connection. The group at the table clapped gently, smiles wide, laughter soft but sincere. Other diners offered quiet applause, nods of approval, subtle gestures of appreciation. Even the staff, caught in the moment, expressed admiration through small smiles and approving glances. The server felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The fear that had once seemed overwhelming had been channeled into presence, into courage, into authenticity. The audience had responded not to perfection, but to honesty. It's not to skill alone, but to the willingness to step forward and be seen. The shared experience had created a space where human connection transcended the ordinary routines of the night. As the server returned to the role of taking orders and carrying trays, the energy of the moment lingered. There was a lightness, a subtle confidence, a quiet glow that had been absent before. The night continued, but something fundamental had shifted the server. The audience, the space itself, had all been touched by a small, extraordinary act of courage in that small restaurant. Amid the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, an ordinary Friday night had become something unforgettable. A simple challenge had led to a journey through fear, presence, courage, and connection. And the server, once just another face in the busy restaurant, had discovered a new part of themselves, a hidden strength, a spark of bravery. a capacity to transform the ordinary into something remarkable. The moment was fleeting, yet its impact was lasting. It had reminded everyone present that vulnerability could be powerful, that fear could be a guide rather than a barrier, and that human connection could emerge in the most unexpected places. The server, having faced the challenge, carried forward a quiet confidence, a reminder that stepping into the unknown could reveal hidden depths, untapped courage, and the extraordinary possibilities hidden within the everyday. The night deepened, and the restaurant gradually settled into a quieter rhythm. The initial energy of the evening had shifted, yet the memory of the unexpected performance lingered in the air, a soft hum of excitement that seemed to vibrate through the tables. The server moved with renewed confidence, carrying trays and taking orders. Yet there was a subtle difference in the way they walked, a quiet sense of ownership over the space that had not been there before. The group at the table that had sparked the performance watched with a new kind of respect. Their teasing smiles had softened into quiet admiration. They had expected a small, entertaining moment, a brief spectacle for their amusement, but what they had witnessed was something deeper, something real. They exchanged glances, acknowledging the courage it took to step into vulnerability. The server had transformed the interaction not with showiness or grandeur, but with authenticity, a quality that resonated more than any polished performance could. Elsewhere in the restaurant, other diners whispered quietly among themselves, a ripple of conversation spreading about their remarkable display. The small, unassuming act had become a story in miniature, a human moment that transcended the ordinary. People noticed details: the careful way the server had moved, the subtle expressions that had conveyed both nervousness and determination, the tiny pauses that had held the attention of the audience. Even those who had initially been skeptical felt drawn in by the sincerity and courage that had filled the room. For the server, the experience became a lens through which to reflect on their own life. Memories surfaced: moments of hesitation, times when fear had held them back, and instances when small acts of bravery had brought fleeting joy or recognition. Each memory carried lessons, both painful and enlightening, reminding them of the power of stepping into discomfort and embracing vulnerability. The performance, small as it had been, was a microcosm of a larger truth. Courage often resided in ordinary moments, waiting for opportunity to awaken it. The group at the table leaned back slightly, allowing space for the server to resume their usual role, yet their eyes lingered. The air carried a sense of anticipation, an unspoken curiosity about what might come next. The server realized that the performance had created a subtle bond, a mutual acknowledgement of shared humanity. It was not about impressing or entertaining, it was about connecting. That connection had the power to linger long after the evening ended. As the night progressed, the server noticed that other tables began to engage more openly, smiles and gestures of appreciation emerging without prompting. The restaurant, once a place defined by routine and transactional interaction, had been subtly transformed. The energy of one small act had rippled outward, creating a collective awareness of presence, attention, and human connection. It was a reminder that even the smallest moments, when approached with sincerity, could resonate far beyond their immediate context. In a quieter corner, a diner observed the scene with thoughtful interest. They had arrived expecting a routine dinner, perhaps a brief respite from the pressures of the day. Yet they found themselves witnessing a human moment that felt profound in its simplicity. The interaction between server and group had revealed layers of courage, authenticity, and engagement that were rarely visible in everyday encounters. It was a testament to the subtle power of human expression, a reminder that even ordinary spaces could host extraordinary experiences. The server, moving through the space with trays and orders, felt an inner shift. The fear that had once loomed large had diminished, replaced by a steady confidence rooted in experience and reflection. Each step, each gesture, carried intention and presence. The performance had been a catalyst, awakening a sense of self that had been quiet for too long, and embracing the unexpected. The server had discovered a deeper understanding of their own capacity for courage and connection. The group at the table, engaged in quiet conversation, reflecting on the evening's events, their initial curiosity had evolved into a more nuanced appreciation, a recognition of the courage it took to step beyond comfort zones. They spoke in low tones, sharing observations about the subtle details that had made the performance memorable. Careful pacing, the unspoken communication, the authenticity that had permeated every movement. In their discussion, they acknowledged that the moment had been more than entertainment. It had been an encounter with genuine human expression. The server, observing the shifting atmosphere, felt a renewed sense of purpose, as they had always approached their work with dedication. But the experience had highlighted a new dimension, an understanding that engagement and authenticity could elevate ordinary interactions into meaningful experiences. It was a lesson that extended beyond the restaurant, a reminder that courage and sincerity had the power to transform even routine moments into memorable ones. As the evening wore on, the server began to notice subtler interactions with diners. Smiles lingered longer, questions were asked with genuine curiosity, and small acts of kindness emerged spontaneously. The ripple effect of the earlier performance was evident in these quiet gestures, testament to the enduring impact of authenticity and presence. The restaurant, while still bustling with activity, had been subtly reshaped by a single act of courage. A reminder that human connection could flourish in even the most ordinary settings. The server reflected on the importance of awareness and mindfulness in everyday interactions. The act of stepping into vulnerability had not only affected the immediate audience, but had influenced the broader environment. It was a lesson in the interconnectedness of human experience, the way a single moment of authenticity could create waves that touched multiple lives. This awareness brought a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, quiet affirmation that courage and presence were invaluable assets. Throughout the night, the server continued to navigate the space with care and attention. Mindful of the subtle energy shifts and responsive to the needs of diners, each interaction was informed by the earlier experience, a blend of confidence, empathy, and attentiveness that enhanced the quality of engagement. The restaurant had become a living laboratory for human connection, a place where the ordinary routines of service were imbued with the richness of presence and interaction. The group at the table eventually began to prepare to leave, but the impact of the interaction remained. Expressed genuine gratitude, acknowledging not only the skill and effort of the server, but also the courage it had taken to embrace the unexpected. Their words carried sincerity, a reflection of the deep impression that authenticity and presence had made. The server, in turn, felt a sense of accomplishment and validation, an acknowledgement that their willingness to step into vulnerability had been meaningful. As the last of the group departed, the restaurant returned to its typical rhythm, yet the subtle changes persisted. The server moved with a quiet confidence, aware of the lingering impact of the evening's events. The interactions that followed were informed by a deeper understanding of presence, courage, and the potential for connection in every exchange. The restaurant, while physically unchanged, had been transformed by the intangible effects of authenticity and human engagement. The server reflected on the lessons learned from the night. The experience had demonstrated that fear and vulnerability, when embraced with intention, could lead to growth, connection, and meaningful interaction. It had highlighted the importance of presence and attentiveness, the power of small acts of courage, and the enduring impact of authenticity. These insights were not limited to the restaurant setting. They were applicable to all areas of life, offering guidance and perspective for navigating challenges and embracing opportunities. In quiet moments, as the restaurant continued its flow of service, the server carried forward the awareness that every interaction held potential. Each smile, each question, each attentive gesture was an opportunity to connect, to engage, and to create a shared human experience. The night had been a reminder that courage was not solely the domain of grand acts, but could be found in everyday moments, in the willingness to step into the unknown and embrace authenticity. The evening concluded, but the lessons endured. The server, now more attuned to the power of presence and the impact of vulnerability, moved through the space with a heightened sense of awareness and purpose. The restaurant, once simply a site of routine service, had become a place of human connection, a stage where courage and authenticity had left an indelible mark. The experience was a testament to the potential for transformation that existed within ordinary moments, waiting for those willing to embrace it. As the lights dimmed and the final diners departed, the server paused to reflect. The night had unfolded in ways that were unexpected, challenging, and ultimately rewarding. The small act of stepping into vulnerability had created ripples that extended beyond the immediate moment, influencing interactions, shaping perceptions, and fostering connection. The journey from fear to courage, from hesitation to authenticity, had revealed the extraordinary potential within the ordinary, a reminder that every moment held the possibility for growth, insight, and meaningful engagement. The night moved on, and the restaurant had settled into a calmer rhythm. Though the air still carried traces of the excitement that had unfolded earlier, the server continued their work with a new sense of ease, gliding between tables with attentive focus. Every step, every gesture, was infused with the quiet confidence that had grown from facing the unexpected moments of the evening. The nervous tension that had once gripped them had transformed into something powerful: presence. The earlier group that had requested a display had left, but the echoes of their encouragement lingered. The experience had not only shifted the dynamics of that small circle, but also influenced the broader environment. Diners, previously focused solely on their meals, now carried a subtle awareness, an openness to the human interactions around them. The server moved through this space, sensitive to the nuances of engagement, noticing small smiles, the way people leaned into conversation, the quiet nods of appreciation. For the server, the performance had been a turning point. It was not a performance for applause, nor an effort to impress, but a discovery of self, the realization that courage and authenticity could resonate deeply when allowed to emerge naturally. Memories of past hesitations surfaced, moments where fear had dictated choices. Moments where the comfort of invisibility had seemed safer. Yet tonight had shown that stepping into the unknown, even briefly, could create profound connection. As the evening continued, the server found themselves drawn into subtle exchanges with diners who were more engaged, more present. Questions about the menu were answered with attentiveness, laughter and conversation were met with warmth, and the atmosphere seemed to respond to the heightened energy of the night. It was as if the small act of vulnerability had opened doors to richer, more meaningful interaction, not just for the server, but for the people around them. In a quiet moment behind the counter, the server allowed themselves a pause. They reflected on the courage it had taken to step out of the familiar and into uncertainty. The initial fear, the anxiety, the self-doubt they had, all been real, tangible forces, yet facing them had revealed a resilience that had previously gone unnoticed. It was a lesson in the power of presence and intention, a reminder that human connection often flourished when one embraced honesty, even at the risk of discomfort. The restaurant, though returning to routine, still carried an undercurrent of energy. Staff members moved with subtle attentiveness, responding to shifts in the environment that had been influenced by the earlier moment. Even the music playing softly in the background seemed to take on new significance, complementing the heightened awareness and shared humanity that had emerged. Every action, no matter how small, contributed to a sense of cohesion, a reminder that connection often relied on the subtleties of interaction rather than grand gestures. The server encountered a new group of diners, arriving late in the evening. They were curious, attentive, and open to engagement, though unaware of the night's earlier events. The server approached with the same quiet confidence, aware that each interaction carried potential for meaningful connection. Small gestures, a warm smile, attentive listening, gentle guidance were enough to create an environment where people felt seen and acknowledged. The lessons of the night informed every choice, every movement, every word in the midst of the evening. A small child approached the server, eyes wide with curiosity. They had noticed the earlier display and were eager to see more, though not in expectation, but in genuine interest. The server crouched to the child's level, offering a friendly smile and a small conversation. It was a reminder of the human element at the core of the night's events. Connection could be simple, intimate, and profoundly impactful. Even in fleeting moments, the child's parents watched with quiet amusement and appreciation. Noting the attentiveness and authenticity in the server's interaction, it was a ripple effect, subtle yet significant. The evening had shown that courage and authenticity were not confined to grand performances. They were present in everyday actions, in the willingness to engage sincerely and respond thoughtfully. The server had become a catalyst for these interactions, a reminder that the ordinary could be extraordinary when approached with presence and care. As the night deepened, the server moved through the restaurant with steady focus, aware of both the responsibilities of service and the opportunities for human connection. Each table offered a new chance to apply the lessons of the evening: listening, observing, responding with authenticity, and creating space for meaningful engagement. The energy of the restaurant, shaped by earlier moments, encouraged attentiveness and responsiveness. Reinforcing the impact of presence and fostering connection, the server reflected on the transformative power of small acts. The earlier performance, though brief and seemingly inconsequential to some, had shifted perceptions, created awareness, and influenced interactions in ways that extended far beyond the initial moment. Courage, authenticity, and vulnerability had ripple effects, touching not just the immediate audience, but the broader environment. It was a reminder that meaningful impact often emerged from the simplest actions. When approached with intention and honesty in quieter moments, the server observed diners engaging with one another more openly, sharing stories, smiles, and laughter. The atmosphere, subtly shifted by earlier events, facilitated connection, understanding, and empathy. Even brief interactions carried significance, reinforcing the idea that human connection thrived in the details and the attentiveness. And in the willingness to embrace authenticity, the server also reflected on personal growth. The night had provided a lens through which to view courage, presence, and engagement in a new way. It was not the absence of fear that mattered, but the choice to act despite it. Each decision, each small step forward, had reinforced the capacity for resilience and authenticity. The evening had been a testament to the transformative potential of embracing vulnerability, even in ordinary contexts. As the restaurant approached closing, the server found moments to acknowledge and appreciate the small victories of the night. A smile exchanged, a gesture recognized. A connection made. These were the threads that wove the fabric of the evening's success. The experience had shown that even in routine work, there was room for growth, for courage, and for connection. The lessons of the night were subtle but enduring, a reminder that human interaction was both an art and a practice. The server noticed that even the staff, moving through their tasks with focus, were influenced by the shifts in energy. Subtle nods, quiet encouragements, and shared understanding marked the interactions among team members. The restaurant, while still a place of service and business, had been temporarily transformed into a space where the human element was highlighted, where courage, authenticity, and presence shaped the flow of events. The server paused near the counter, reflecting on the night's unfolding. They considered the ways in which fear had been confronted, courage expressed, and connection achieved. Each choice, each action, had contributed to a narrative that was larger than the individual moments, a story of transformation, of engagement, and of the power of presence. The evening had demonstrated that ordinary spaces could host extraordinary experiences when, approached with intention and authenticity, in the final moments of service. As diners prepared to leave and the restaurant dimmed its lights, the server felt a quiet satisfaction. The night had been more than a shift. It had been a journey through fear, courage, and human connection. The lessons learned were subtle, yet profound, offering insights that extended beyond the restaurant walls. The experience had revealed the power of small acts, the importance of presence, and the enduring impact of authenticity. As the last guests departed and the staff began the closing routine, the server reflected on the broader implications of the evening, the performance, the interactions, and the subtle shifts in energy had created a tapestry of human experience, moments of courage, empathy, connection, and growth, woven together in a single night. The awareness and understanding gained would carry forward, influencing future interactions and shaping the approach to both work and life. The restaurant, returning to quiet, retained an intangible sense of the night's events. Though the tables were empty and the clatter of service had ceased, the lessons remained. Embedded in the minds and hearts of those who had witnessed or participated, the server, standing among the quiet, felt a renewed sense of purpose, a deep appreciation for the impact of courage and authenticity, and a quiet confidence in the power of presence to shape human connection. As the lights dimmed completely and the doors closed, the server took a final moment to reflect. The night had been ordinary in many ways, just another shift in a familiar place, but it had also been extraordinary. A small act of courage had sparked transformation, connection, and growth, revealing the hidden potential within everyday moments. The experience had been a reminder that the ordinary, when approached with presence, authenticity, and willingness, could become truly remarkable. The morning sun began to filter through the restaurant windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The night had ended, and the restaurant was quiet, almost serene in contrast to the buzz of the previous evening. The server, still tired from the long hours, moved with calm focus, cleaning, arranging chairs, and preparing for the day ahead. Yet beneath the routine, there was a sense of lingering change, a quiet awareness of what had unfolded and what it meant. The events of the night felt almost surreal now. Looking back, the server could trace each moment the anticipation, the fear, the courage, the small acts of authenticity that had rippled through the space. Every interaction had held meaning, every choice had been deliberate, and the human connections formed had left traces that were subtle but profound. It was a reminder that even ordinary spaces and ordinary roles could host extraordinary experiences if approached with presence and honesty.